guys, welcome to the third week of our Skills and Drills class. This technique we're going to do today is the blind cross. So we've covered our front cross where we're in front of our dog and wanting our dog to collect. We've covered the rear cross where we want the dogs to drive in front of us and we're handling them from behind. And now we're going to do the blind cross, which is again a technique where we're going to be in front of our dog, and this technique cues extension. So we use a blind cross wherever the turn is shallow and we want to change our handling side. And the key things for it are you need to be in front of your dog and that it cues extension. So you do need to pick where you're going to use the blind cross. So remember, we have the basic techniques to change our handling side, which is the front, the rear and the blind. So depending on the angle of where you're going next is what you're going to choose to do. So in this setup, we go into the tunnel and it's these three jumps here, and I do my blind through here and finish there. Because that's a shallow angle and it's a nice line for the dog to extend through, I'm going to choose to do the blind there. Because I don't want my dog to collect, I want it to keep powering through, and so that's why I would choose the blind for that. Now, if my dog was coming through these jumps here, but then finishing over here, I would not choose the blind for this one because the angle is much tighter and I would want my dog to collect a little bit to be able to take this jump here. So in this case, I would handle this with a front cross because I want to cue that collection to be able to get them to turn nicely. So in general, we try and think about if the turn is 45 degrees or less, then we would choose a blind. If the degree of the turn is bigger than 45, then we would start to look at using something else, and mainly probably a front cross. So just think about it in terms of where the dog's line goes, and do you think the dog needs to collect there, or do you think the dog can extend through? So those of you, and I put my hand up, that have lower drive dogs that are a bit slower, the blind is your friend because it allows you to keep moving forward, and if you've got a slower dog, you can get in front of your dog, and the blind cross keeps them powering through their course much easier. I use blinds a lot with both Storm and Cooper because they're not the fastest dogs going around, and I can really get a lot of speed out of them by having them power through in extension most of their handling. Unless it calls for collection. So a blind is one of my favourite things to do, and it's one of those things that those of you with fast dogs get a little scared of doing because you're afraid that they might take you out, because the blind is one of those techniques where we do lose connection with our dog because we're changing handling sides with them behind us. So we do lose connection with them for a slight minute, which can freak some people out. So in terms of the blind cross with our handling elements, motion with the blind cross, it's important to always be driving forward and powering through. So I like to be doing my blind and just good pace all the way through the technique. That will mean that you can cue that extension with the dog and they will drive through with you. So that's motion. Position, like I said, you need to be in front of your dog and you need to be in front of your dog to change the handling side. So that's in terms of position. When it comes to connection, the important parts are, first, you want to be connecting before you change your handling side. So connecting with your dog, and then a stride before takeoff of the obstacle you're going to do the blind on, and in this case the obstacle I'm doing the blind on is this one. So least one stride before takeoff, you want to be doing your blind. So connecting and connecting. So the key thing with the connection is that reconnection. So I want to be connecting with my dog before the blind, but the important part is that as soon as I do the blind, I'm already looking over this shoulder. And a lot of the times, you'll see me do a blind here and start looking over the shoulder before I cross the intended line. And that allows you to get that connection earlier. The next part is feet. Chest. So, chest, what do we do when we want the dogs to go forward? Chest going the way we want them to go. So, remember we're cueing extension, so my chest is always going to be facing forward. So, as I'm doing my blind, my chest stays forward. That helps cue the extension. The next is our feet. And again, remember, when we try and do most of these techniques, the feet and chest generally work together most of the time, not all the time, but most. So again, I want my feet going forward all the time. So as I'm driving through, my feet stay forward all the time. The next is hands. And again, hands, we don't want them waving about. Keeping my elbows towards my side, connecting, and just changing the side we're handling from. So you don't need to do anything drastic with the hands. They just change sides. And a verbal, I don't have any verbal for my blind crosses. I just power through. So they're your handling elements in a nutshell. Now the thing I want to talk to you about the blind cross is how I like to think about them. I like to do my blind crosses early. And the earlier you can do it, one, the safer you feel because you're well and truly off their line. And two, it gives the dog information early. So in the case with the setup I've got here, and I have the video to go with it, I would be doing my blind as they're landing from the purple jump. So I would want to be up here doing my blind as they're landing from the first jump out of the tunnel. And that gives me a heap of time to be through my technique and showing them where to go next. The other thing I want you to think about is, even though my blind is for this jump here, you'll notice whenever I do my technique, I'm blinding more up towards the next obstacle. Because the closer you are to the obstacle after the blind, the easier it is going to be for you. Because remember, the dogs come through on that line. We want to be off their line. So it's much easier for me to aim up here for the blind and be crossing up here than trying to do my blind here. Because then I am sort of in the zone where they want to land. And if I'm late, they are going to take my legs out. So if I'm closer to the obstacle after the blind, the easier it's going to be for the dog to find that line nicely through there. So I'll walk this technique now fully so you can see how I do it. So becoming tunnel, connecting with my dog out of tunnel, they're landing that purple jump blind and through. So the key things to remember in the blind are: one, you're always moving forward. Two, connection, connection, connection. Make sure you're connecting with them before so they know where they're going, and make sure that you connect as soon as you can after doing the blind so that you can get that reconnection and show them where they're going next. So they're the two important things. And again, if you have connection, you know when to do the technique. Because as soon as I see my dog landing on that first purple jump after the tunnel, I go, yep, they're on the line for jump 2. I can blind now. And I think what we tend to do with blinds is wait until they're too late. And it's amazing how early you can do a blind. For something like this, with an experienced dog, and you could be blinding before they're taking off for the first purple jump. But that comes with practice and getting to know your dog, and depending on the situation. So this is a nice situation for a blind because it's nice and flowing, but there are tighter blinds that we do that you can't get that much ahead of. But again, the key is you need to have the technique done and the turn cued before they're taking off. So one stride before takeoff. Vital that it happens then, because that will tell them where they're going. They can continue to power through. Collection's not needed. So remember when we talked about the takeoff point, think about the takeoff points here. Think about one stride before takeoff. And if we think about that in this setup, one stride before takeoff is pretty much as they're landing from that first purple jump. So that's how early you have to cue the blind, because it gets you off their path. It allows the dog to see clearly where they're going next, so they don't need to hesitate. They don't need to collect, and that's what the goal for the blind cross is. We want them to power through the move, keeping their speed, keeping the extension going. So they're the key things I want you to remember. 1, you need to be in front of your dog. 2, the dog needs to know at least one stride before takeoff, and if not earlier. And 3, try and aim to do your blinds towards the next obstacle after the one you're doing the blind cross on, because it will help you with your timing. So good luck with the blind cross courses, and I'll enjoy looking for your videos. Thanks, guys.